We are recapping the 2024 season with some fill in the blank right now on Fantasy Football Today Express. Adam Azer and Jamie Eisenberg on January 1st. Happy New Year, everybody. Hope 2024 was great for you. 2025 will be even better. All right, I got some fill in the blank questions for Jamie. The player who saved my fantasy season was blank.
Oh, boy. Let's go with Brian Thomas Jr. I mean, just an absolute amazing finish, strong season overall for a rookie. But we had this comment on the full-length episode about New Year's resolutions and not giving up on players when their quarterback situation was bad. And I think a lot of people thought, okay, this is it for Thomas, who had, again, borderline number 2 receiver numbers when Trevor Lawrence was hurt and then eventually placed on IR. And his numbers were dramatically better with Mac Jones. And so, this is going to be an interesting one to rank because he did this with a different quarterback, with most likely a different head coach, with no Christian Kirk, with no Gabe Davis, with no Evan Ingram. All those guys in some capacity are expected back. And hopefully an upgraded coaching situation from an offense. Like you don't want to see them go hire Mike Vrabel, for example, if they fire Doug Peterson, and then it's just a bad offensive environment overall, potentially. So if it's Ben Johnson, I'll love Brian Thomas. If it's, again, also ran head coach that they couldn't get the guy that they wanted, then we could be headed for maybe a potential sophomore slump.
For me, it's Baker Mayfield, and just especially finishing strong his last 4 games, 25 points, 36 points, 26 points, 45 points in 6-point per passing touchdown leagues. Saved my season, carried me. So, yeah, way to go, Baker Mayfield. And he was, I think, 60% rostered in week 1. So I think we can call him a waiver wire, the best waiver wire pickup of the year. My biggest fantasy regret this season was blank.
Giving up too quickly on the older running backs, from Derrick Henry to Aaron Jones to I wasn't out on Barkley, so he doesn't fall in that category for me. I'm trying to think like the guys that
James Conner.
James Conner. Yep, that's a good one. I was definitely out on Conner. So I feel like the receivers that I was worried about, for the most part, I was right. Now Evans banged up. He's probably the one. Adams was so up and down. Like he had a few amazing games, but I think overall he was probably drafted appropriately, but still disappointing. Cooper Kupp, that was obvious. He was bad. Hopkins was not good. If you sliding scale. Keenan Allen had like 4 good games.
Yeah.
So the receivers I feel kind of justified in avoiding those guys at their age. And Thielen missed the majority of the season. The running backs though, like those 3 guys in particular, Jones didn't get hurt, and when he did, he played. Connor obviously lasted the majority of the season, and clearly Derrick Henry was a monster.
I guess my regret is not drafting any Barkley, but also just completely underestimating Brian Thomas Jr. Just what a whiff. The most underrated player in fantasy this year was blank.
So underrated from a pre-draft standpoint, or
however you want to do it.
Underrated player. I guess it's probably Baker. Like, going into the season, like you just said it, rostered in fewer than 60% of leagues and coming off the season that he had last year. Why didn't we give him more love as a potential number 1 quarterback? And he clearly proved us wrong.
Yeah, I guess that'd be a pretty good answer there. I'm trying to think of let's just leave it with that. Okay, next up is the fantasy sleeper I wish I drafted was blank. So it's definitely Brian Thomas Jr. for me. I looked at Brian Thomas Jr. as a guy who basically just was a deep threat. I thought he was just going to be a deep threat as a rookie. He was young, he was raw, and most of his touchdowns, I think he had the most touchdowns in the country at LSU. Most of them were deep balls. And I don't know. I mean, they had Christian Kirk, they had Evan Ingram. I could not see this happening. So bad evaluation on my part, big miss. That's my biggest regret. The fantasy sleeper I wish I drafted, that was the question. The fantasy sleeper I wish I drafted was blank.
I'm trying to look at the team just to make sure I get enough answer for you, a good answer for you. I'll give you one, and this is another waiver wire guy, and I liked him. I just didn't draft enough of him. Was Darnell Mooney. I liked him going to Atlanta as the number 2 receiver there, and I think it was and this is how I had it ranked. But this is going to be great for Drake London, Kirk Cousins, and the coaching staff. This is going to be great for Kyle Pitts, and Mooney's going to be a good fit. I didn't expect this, and so he carried a few of my rosters middle of the season. With the way that he played.
All right, we're going to take a break. We got some more fill in the blanks when we come back on Fantasy Football Today. By the way, I think Brock Bowers was a good answer. I saw that in our chat.
Yeah.
Good answer for Fantasy Sleeper. I wish I drafted was. Look, if I had known they were going to trade Devontae Adams, I would have drafted Brock Bowers.
Yeah, but I mean, he was doing. He got off to a good start. Another one. This is a good call too. Was Chuba Hubbard.
Oh yeah.
So there were two guys that we said three guys that we said going into the season. Once we knew all the injury scenarios, it was Chuba Hubbard. Okay, he's going to get maybe 4 games, and then Brooks is going to come in and take the job. It was Jerome Ford. He's going to come in, and eventually Nick Chubb's going to take the job. And then at the 11th hour, it was Jordan Mason. Once Mitchell got hurt and McCaffrey was out, like these 3 guys can help you. And Hubbard was the one. Remember his first 2 weeks?
No.
God awful. Week 1 was a disaster. Week 2 was terrible, and then it was. And this is one of my biggest regrets. I had him on the drop list. It was Brooks could come back in 2 weeks. This may be just a terrible offensive environment. Move on from Chuba Hubbard, and then he wasn't a superstar.
Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton changed everything for everyone. All right, we'll be right back on Fantasy Football Today Express. All right, this is a good one. Next up, fill in the blank. The most frustrating fantasy player to own this year was blank.
Injuries or not injuries?
I mean, the injury ones are kind of easy. Like McCaffrey was so frustrating. You're just waiting for a timetable. He comes back. He's bad, basically, or like he's not that good, and then he gets hurt again. Jalen Hurts to me was very frustrating because of injury, but also he had that bad stretch right before the playoffs. Then he was amazing. Then he crushed you in week 17 or week 16. But I think, probably it would have to be a non-injury one.
I could probably give you a team. So if we want to go Jalen Hurts as the quarterback, the running backs could be Breece Hall. Got very frustrating at the end.
Yes, he sure did.
Who would be another running back? The receivers are easy. It's like Jalen Waddle was one for me. Somebody put in the chat is a good one. Jordan Love. He's Jordan Love.
I think he's got to be a guy that it kind of disappointed you, but you couldn't just outright sit him, right? He gave you enough glimpses. I think DK Metcalf.
Oh, it's a great call. Yep.
Falls into that category.
Cooper Kupp. Injury
Kupp.
and non-injury.
Mm-hmm. Zay Flowers. Was he frustrating?
Yeah, he was frustrating too.
Like a star. He looked like a breakout star the first. Even though he got off to a slow start, he was getting so many targets. Then he had this huge run.
Dude, the one game, because I remember I said sit him because of Patrick Surtain, the Broncos game.
Oh,
okay. He went nuts, went nuclear.
The Marvin Harrison Jr. I think would be on here. Ken Walker.
That's a good one. Sure.
Yeah. All right. The most important lesson I learned in fantasy football this season was blank.
Don't give up on talented players going to elite situations.
Yeah, Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley. And I think you could just draft players on the offenses that we know are going to be good, and only those players. I'm not saying like you talk about Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors. All that. You don't have to be on a great offense, but really you could just draft a team of players on good offenses and just take nothing but Lions, Bills, Bengals, Ravens, and you'll probably be fine. There's a few other teams in there, obviously. It's not always so easy to predict who the best offenses are going to be. I mean, the Bucs, I think, surprised us, but I think that is something that jumps out. It's like just target players on good offenses. We have one more. The player I'm most excited to draft in 2025 is blank.
Jane Daniels.
I'm going to go with a late-ish pick. I don't think it'll be that late, but hopefully picked in around 8-ish or so. Assuming Keenan Allen is not back, it's going to be Rome Odunze for me.
Good call.
I am hoping. I do this sometimes where I ignore the bad and I just focus on the good, and I might be doing that with Caleb Williams, but I'm hoping for a much, much better season for Caleb Williams. I have a feeling everyone's going to jump on that, and it will not be there won't be any value in it, but I'm hoping for a bounce back for Williams and for Odunze to put something together.
I'll give you another one. He's going to be drafted a little sooner than that, depending on what happens, but if Godwin is gone from Tampa Bay. Jalen McMillan will be something I'm very excited about.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for watching and listening. We'll talk to you tomorrow on Fantasy Football Today Express.